everybody. So just a little bit, before I turn it over to Chris and Lydia, just a little bit about kind of what tonight is and what it isn't. So it is not, there is no expectation that we are going to get all the way through everything about all financial issues and our budget priorities, et cetera. Our main focus tonight will be to share the 3-year budget projection, which is where we typically with the board begin our budget cycle every year, kind of doing a very high level look at what we see the next 3 years looking like. It is always speculative to a certain extent, particularly when you get to the 2nd and 3rd years out, because we will have some of the variables that we know of right now is that the legislature is in session, and if they perhaps did something with an additional 1% COLA as the governor has proposed, that automatically comes with a fairly significant local cost to us that changes the projections. Between now and the 3 years that the projection talks about, in theory, next spring in this 2017 legislative session, there's supposed to be the grand bargain that is somehow supposed to fix basic education funding in the state. So what does that look like? We don't know. And right now, if nothing changes, and there is no grand bargain, there's this levy clip thing out there that's supposed to, take $500 million of already approved funding out of school districts. So all of those things together, create some level of uncertainty. So we do the best we can. Chris and Lydia will share kind of the assumptions that they're operating from. We then hope to share a little bit about kind of the things that kind of staffing and program recommendations that we're talking about for next year that we've been processing around in cabinet. Some of them are kind of off the list of what I would consider recommendations because they've now been approved actions, and the biggest example would be the kindergarten plan. So all the costs associated with that are, from our point of view, part of what we need to be programming and planning to for next year. And then there's some other things that we have that we're talking about, and certainly want to share those with you. And then just very briefly touch on a little bit, not part of the presentation, but I've got a little handout just to show a little bit of what we're doing kind of behind the scenes to start itemizing what we see as the transition costs associated with everything 2017, 18, 2018, 19 as we look at grade reconfiguration, boundary adjustments, opening of North Creek High School, etc. And we're still doing some work to kind of tease out what our defining what's a true transition cost from what's sort of an ongoing operational cost we're just going to incur as we change as a school district, both with another school and a reconfigured system. So we're still working through that, but at least to give you a kind of a flavor for some of the things that we're doing along those lines as well. So with that, the other thing I will say here as well, and Chris and Lydia will talk about this. As you know, we are also in negotiations with our 2 largest associations. So the numbers you're going to see, we have placeholders for what a certain percentage on top of the currently funded COLAs or the currently programmed COLAs are for all of the groups that are open, but we haven't put any placeholders in the budget presuming what those settlements would be. So just keep that in mind that the figures you're going to see rolling themselves through don't include those settlement costs, whatever those may be. And of course, later in the month we'll be talking bargaining parameters with the board, so we'll be able to have a little bit more granular conversation about.
When did the negotiations start?
April.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, such a big table I will have to stand, because otherwise you can't see me back here. So, Larry said most of it. I just wanted to add that we've been doing the 3-year financial projections for a number of years, high-level look at snapshot, entering the budget season. Last year was the first year that we presented to the board with our budget and program staffing enhancement recommendations. And we heard, Larry and I, that June was late in the process, so this is the first time that we're consolidating the 2 items. There. So the governor came out with a budget December 17th, minimal minimal changes to the biennial budget. He proposed raising beginning teacher salaries and then giving an additional COLA over the existing 1.2 plus the 0.6, another 1% on top of that for just state funded positions. And keep in mind, again, classified positions that are funded at $33,000 a year, each and every one of us classified people. Administrators, principals are funded at $58,000, and teachers are funded, pretty much what they're compensated at. So, should this go through, which it doesn't have any traction, it costs the district quite a bit of money. So, by context, we believe that the legislature needs to address compensation in McCleary, and that this is not addressing compensation, and we don't believe this plan is going to go through. So it is not incorporated into our expenditures.
Do we know where it's at?
I think it's nowhere. I don't even know, I'm not even aware that there's been legislation introduced to advance it. It was, I think, pretty much seen as kind of dead on arrival when it was proposed. Governor's clout is a little bit diminished right now, so, yeah.
So we have to, gauge what the chances of any measure going through. In our revenue projections is quite a bit of data. The biggest driver of revenue is our enrollment. Our enrollment is going up substantially in the next 2 years because kindergartners who, whether they attend full day or half day currently, are only counted by the state as half day. So even the ones who attend full day now are half day, because their other half day is tuition funded, not state funded. So every single kindergartner, except for the Kenmore and Woodland this year, is just a half day. So as we perhaps turn a full day classroom, tuition based, into state funded, we gain half an FTE for that student, even though we already have that full day classroom. So next year, about 721 FTE, 330 approximately for converting to full day kindergarten classrooms where we can. You'll see in the second year, an additional 403, and that will complete the kindergarten transitions to half day to full day. And then 18, 19, another substantial increase without that kindergarten component. So 436 is quite significant over what we've even seen in the last couple of years. It's another
That's
large.
just new kids coming.
Yeah, so just enrollment growth is generally about where we've been, about 400 FTE per year.
And yeah, this is.
And up a little bit in 18, 19, projected.
So we believe, and just by way of, we believe we're going to average at right about 20,000 this year, which is the first time the district's ever hit 20,000 full-time equivalents, not heads, but equivalents. So we could be seeing 22,000 in a couple of years. Hence our growth issues. So state-funded kindergarten is going to, for the full-day programs that we have, probably should have put it next to it, but we're going to lose tuition. There is, in the biennial budget, there was a 1.2% COLA plus a 6% catch-up COLA for 1.8. We're still operating under that assumption that, the 3% went through this year, that the 1.8% will be funded and we will pass that through. We looked up the Washington State Economic and Revenue Forecast Council information. They have the COLA, the state COLA initiative 732 is tied to CPI. We look at the projections for the consumer price index for future years, and they're currently going up.
And Lydia, on that, if I'm following, when we offer those COLAs from the state only funds part of it.
Yes.
So so we're paying 30-ish, 40-ish% of that COLA. So all employees would get a pay raise, but the state's only paying for like 60% of it, and the district through levies or some other source has to come up with the additional 40%.
Correct.
And is that ish, right? 30s, 40% is our,
We could
It's
calculate it
about
off.
$1 million, it's about $1 million.
Yeah, we'll
For
get to a
each-
chart.
okay, but just so when the state gives a COLA,
Yeah.
they give us an invoice that we have to pay
Yeah,
more
so-
money.
So the
Yes.
state, as Lydia said, we get $58,000 for every certificated administrator our enrollment generates. It's all formula driven.
Right.
Right? So let's just say for sake of argument, our average principal costs twice that amount.
Right.
When the state funds a 1.8% COLA, they give us 1.8% on the 58,000. We have to pay 1.8% on our actual salary for that employee, which is, roughly double that.
And I just, pardon if this is too detailed, we're required by contract or by law to pay that, or is that been tradition that we would pay on the part that's not funded by the state?
It's actually both, I believe. So it's contractually bound. It's also part of tradition, but I think it's also legal, isn't it?
It says pass through to all school employees.
Employees,
This COLA shall be passed through to all school employees. And any district who has tried to fight that, so to say, has been unsuccessful.
Years ago, before I-732, districts would make an argument that whatever the increase in apportionment was the pot of money they would pass on to employees, and more often. Part of it was a negotiation strategy, would offer less than the COLA based on the actual increase in state funds. The initiative makes it change the whole thing in terms of and how the courts interpreted the application of the initiative.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so this year and next year, the state is making strides towards improving the funding that they give us for K through 3 class size, the early grades. And so we believe they are starting to catch up the funding to what we're already doing. So that is a gain in revenues. Lower staff mix than projected. What that means is for certificated instructional staff, there is a matrix of education this way and years of experience that way, and you compensate them based on where they fall in the matrix, and then the state reimburses you for that same amount. So our experience in education is actually going down a bit, which is truly normal. We had quite a high staff mix because people were not retiring in the recession. So this is not anything bad, it just is our current mix. As people retire and we don't get as seasoned employees, and that's just fine. So we do get less apportionment funding, but we also incur less cost on the flip side, so.
And just as a reminder, the full state reimbursement is for the base salary of the teacher. And then there's the local factor, the local try that goes on top of that, that's not funded by the state.
Right. Okay, there is a very small inflationary factor applied to the materials, supplies, and operating costs. So we saw the larger jump last year that said it was fully funded, and now it's just a small inflationary factor. Okay, so, and then later in the presentation, you'll see that we've done the levy 2 ways, one with the cliff, one without the cliff, to try and give you a feel for both. And then starting next year, currently a full-time student is basically 5 periods a day with passing time of 60 minutes. That's 300 minutes a day, 1,500 minutes a week. So they're changing the definition of what you can count as a full FTE from 1,500 minutes a week to 1,665 minutes. So because of a rule on you have to have an annualized average of providing 1,027 instructional hours, which is basically 1,080 hours in the upper grades and 1,000 hours in the elementary grades. which averages to 1,027, and now they are restructuring how they count. So if a student takes 6 periods a day, we're fine. If a student takes 5 periods a day, we're actually gonna lose a little bit of money. But the biggest difficulty is if you go to running start, say 2 periods, your 4 periods that you're at the high school are worth less than they are today.
So there's an .02 FTE for every class.
Period.
And we end up losing about 50 FTE based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not, you can't, you know, you don't want to deny your kids from doing, you know, skills center or running start, but the net effect is that your high school classes are worth less in funding and FTE. So,
And those they do.
and they do. So those are the major revenue assumptions. Major expenditure assumptions, certainly implementation of full, you know, partial full-day kindergarten where we can. Open the North Shore Primary Center to accommodate growth and kinder numbers. Opening of North Creek High School in 17-18 with presumed transition costs before and after that process. Certainly with increased enrollment comes increased staff. And we also have, until 17-18, we have been making mitigation efforts at some of our very, very large schools that were not designed to be that large. Increased costs for the COLA, and what I listed is current, which is known collective bargaining agreements. So those contracts that are good through 16-17, we know what those costs for those groups are, but obviously our very large groups are still open. Lower staff mix, again, we pay less because our teachers aren't as high on the experience and education. And then we haven't heard anything about a change in the health benefits. Last year, I think it was $12 a month, so I haven't heard anything that they're adjusting it this year. And the original biennial budget didn't adjust it.
Just one thing I'd add, based on a conversation we had at Cabinet yesterday.
Yes.
I'm not sure that we have fully accounted for yet in the projection you're going to see what we may need to mitigate at large schools for next year. You know, we know what we're doing this year, and at some of the schools that are going to continue to get even larger, we're not sure that continuation of the same levels of support are going to be completely adequate, but we haven't really landed on what that might look like yet. So,
Like, what do you mean, like teachers are staffing or reasons?
or school assistants, deans of students, additional administrators, office staff, all of those kinds of places.
Extra copiers.
All of those, well, yeah, but all those kinds of places where we've been throwing support at them the last couple of years, knowing, next year's gonna be our most challenging year, and I just wanna put an asterisk there that I don't know that we've got some things in there, but I don't know that we've adequately accounted for all of the help those schools are gonna necessarily need.
Another item that is not on the list is, because it's still forming, is later start time. You know, I've seen 21 proposals, and I don't think there's enough decision to start costing that out. There is likely a cost, it will likely impact the bottom line, and we need to keep that in our head with our available resources. So far, we will continue to designate $500,000 a year for the new high school costs, which will be the end of this year and the end of next year. We may be designating at the same time we start spending it, but we'll account for that. As the expenditures increase, we have a minimum fund balance policy of 3%, and that's based on total expenditures. So as expenditures increase, 3%, we have to increase that. And then eventually we will use the $2.5 million that we've been setting aside for grade reconfiguration and opening up the new high school, somewhere between this year, probably into 18, even maybe 19. And then, but those are planned one-time transition costs, it will be consumed, and then we'll be back to where we have been before we started planning the new high school. So we came up with some items that we want to focus on. You always see in the governor's budget, they, hold steady and get ready, and he's always got some catchy little phrase, so the best I could come up with is transition year. So the focus will be on full-day kindergarten for all students in 17-18, with some schools transitioning next year. Certainly grade reconfiguration in North Creek, later start times. Again, no estimated cost, but the consideration. Continued efforts on diversity and equity. Certainly your labor relations and open contracts, and then anything that the legislature might come out with that we will have to.
Well, let's put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It has some interesting ones.
We do not
Does
have-
that equity, does that encompass like opportunity to add, you mean by equity, are you talking about our plans and our plans?
We're mostly thinking about continuing the plans, the training, the work we've been doing with Ed Northwest, and what does that look like year 2? That's what we're talking about. But right now, what we just have, what you'll see is just kind of a dollar amount placeholder that we're proposing.
So you have basically 2 of the same sheet, but there is a difference on the standalone sheet. So again, what I heard last year in June was it felt like a lot of these items, do you have both?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of these items were decided, late in June, and perhaps there was no time to turn the ship.
Yep.
So, Cabinet has worked, they've never had to come up with all of this quite so early, so I just want to applaud everybody for putting this together with some good information and some good costing.
This is great, and having been watching the budget, if I can, just interrupt, when I saw these numbers, and I said, it's a early process, this is really, and we really appreciate you guys staying late tonight and all the work that you're doing, trying to get the numbers, especially in the challenge that we have, so thank you to all of you who participated in that.
So the first section in beige, I guess, is everything associated with full-day kindergarten and the North Shore Primary Center, what we expect to properly run the program at the primary center. So we consider, Chris and I, factored those costs into the actual 3-year projection that you're going to see, okay? The next section on compensation and benefits, we are estimating that the local cost of 1.8% COLA is, and there are some prior settlement costs where the contracts are done for 16, 17, so we can anticipate the cost of those contracts.
Wait, did you say these are the same document?
They are very similar, but, so if you can work off either right now, and I'll tell you how they're different.
Okay.
In a bit.
I was,
Yeah. Either's fine.
that one has code.
Okay. So, again, the 1.4 million, it's either settled contracts or the cost of a 1.8% COLA, which we have no discretion but to pass through to all employees. So that is factored into the projection. Everything associated with North Creek High School is factored into the projection, with the exception of the assistant principal. We are reviewing the rules around capitalizing salary costs, and if the assistant principal is also considered in the planning process, which is therefore capitalizable.
Right.
The other positions, the office manager, the registrar, I believe those costs are operational and usual costs for a high school, and therefore unlikely capitalizable.
So this is a good example, much of those North Creek, of where we've been struggling a little bit on what's a transition cost and what's sort of an ongoing operational cost. You can make one argument that says these are transition costs because these are the people you need to help you get ready to open up North Creek High School.
But once North Creek High School is open in 17-18, those staff positions will all be there and will be part of the ongoing operational cost of the school. So we're just trying to make sure that we're clear in our own mind as we make, start adding these positions, because what we don't want to do is under account for it one way or another. Either spend the $2.5 million reserve more than once, or not properly account for what are our ongoing costs going to be once the school is open in 17-18 and beyond. So
And remind me again, what's the annual cost of a high school? Because, I mean, it's gonna
it's
go
gone
up.
up about what, 2?
2.6?
2.6.
The what?
So just to add another high school is gonna add 2.6 million to our expenditures.
Every year.
Yearly
Every year.
On top of what we get from the state for the kids going there?
Just the infrastructure cost of the school. So you've added, we go from 32 to 33 schools, just the core staff of that school, principals, assistant principals, counselors, librarians, all of that core staff. Teachers kind of track with kids.
Yeah.
But the core staff and then utilities, insurance, all of those kinds of added infrastructure costs of just having one more building and a big one in the district.
And later in the presentation, you'll see that 2.6 flowing between 2 years and then becoming permanent.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
So one-time costs are typically capital, come out of the bond that we,
So they're
Very
both.
limited.
okay.
So a one-time cost, and we'll get to this in a bit, but moving teachers is not capitalizable, but it certainly is a one-time cost.
Okay,
Outfitting the play fields is a one-time cost for now, and that's capitalizable. So there's general and capital one-time costs, and there's general ongoing costs.
like
So,
what about buying sports equipment,
one time.
capital?
We're working on that. Yeah.
Because it stays at the school
Yes.
essentially.
Yes. Yeah. It's the
But still.
Is it-
extracurricular nature of it that throws a monkey wrench. Textbooks. Okay, one time, capitalizable.
Oh, really?
Most
For that school only.
For North.
Correct,
Yeah.
no, I understood that.
Yeah.
But you try to put as much into the capitalizing as you can. I see that.
Well, we have you can't capitalize something that you aren't allowed to.
Right,
And-
but you try to,
Well, capital's also working with their budget too, so we're trying to maximize everything.
yeah, I'm not saying count things that you
Oh,
can't
no,
count,
yeah.
but
But yes.
try to get as much in the pot, essentially.
Tide us over, yeah. So again, purple section, oops, I'm keeping it. Purple section, we are considering, as we are proceeding, and that's in the 3-year. So after last year's issues, when we started to contract for a mental health threat assessments to be done externally, we had estimated, a certain amount, and we discovered that we are utilizing it more than we anticipated, which is not a bad thing. So that has been programmed into 15-16, and we need to program into 16-17 and beyond, because we expect that use. Woodinville SRO, very interesting. Bothell and Woodinville have comparable levels of service, 40 hours a week, basically, by our respective police agencies. Woodinville was only charging us $20,000, Bothell is close to $50,000. So Woodinville was concerned that their contract hasn't been adjusted. So I agreed to 40 this year, after lots of negotiating, and said that we really need to look at our SRO programs because North Creek's coming on board. So I said, Woodinville, give you a 1-year contract, tide us over because we need to start having those discussions on what kind of, which which entity is able to provide. Is it
Snohomish,
Snow
right?
County?
Yeah.
Snow-
It's in Snohomish
That's-
County.
Yeah,
It's not Buffalo though.
but Snow County has reduced their programs in other places, so we need to have a big discussion.
Oh, yeah,
So
I
this-
lived there, call the police for Snohomish, and they're not coming for a while.
Yeah, so this gets us by, but they will certainly expect at least 40 next year. There was so that's program, an ELL task force summary, completed a year ago, just about. And in that is, we are increasing the number of ELL teachers every year, so this is the second year of a 3 or 5.
5-year.
So we'll need to keep factoring that in.
Why
Here's-
is 100,000?
Just think of one teacher as one fully staffed teacher, salary benefits, all in, just $100,000.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
It's not what they're
ballpark
paying,
number, yeah.
it's what it
Really?
costs it is, yes.
It's not their take-home pay.
But that's your average
Some
teacher.
of them take home more than that.
Right,
So your average teacher.
the mix works out,
Right.
from a planning perspective.
Base 180 days, then they have a compensation package. Benefits are up to 22% because of what the Department of Retirement Systems is, the employer share for retirement is 12 and 13% depending on what group, very, very high. Medical is $10,008 a year per employee, so
All of those costs added together for your average teacher,
it's 100.
total roughly $100,000.
I wouldn't-
But that's not what.
That's not their pay.
It's not
I
take home.
get it,
Just their
but-
cost. Okay, so here is where we just talked about the student full-time equivalency being redefined from 1,500 minutes to 1665. Chris estimated based on current enrollment and courses that students are taking that if it was today and we expect next year to look similar, that we would lose about $325,000 in apportionment.
So I'm gonna ask the program mission to the dollar kind of a question. And I'm not sure we ever want to do this in great detail, but is there some operational change we could make to change the cost? Such as a longer school day, or a shorter school day, or having them wear pink, because there's legislation that says if you wear pink, you know, I'm
Well,
just.
certainly a longer school day, if they're in school more out, it really goes down to the number of minutes that they're in school each week. So if there was a longer school day where a period was more minutes and they added up closer to the 1665,
Right,
then we get closer to being able to capture that full 1.0 FTE. But a longer school day, you have to factor what's gonna be the cost of that, because we have to buy that,
right.
you know. Staff have a defined workday now that we pay for. If we're gonna stretch or elongate that workday somehow, there's gonna be a cost to that, so what's the offset going to be?
So it's unlikely to be, and it's not a big,
Yeah.
in that number.
Yeah, I think over time that number will probably shrink a little bit, because remember, we're heading into the 24 credit graduation requirement in the class of 2019, so I think we're probably gonna see fewer kids going through this system. We're gonna be eligible to take 5 periods at some point in
I
their high school
understand.
career.
Okay, so this is only the
5-year.
less than 6 period?
Correct,
Yes.
Okay,
But the
okay.
big difficulty is the running start.
right.
Do you tell a student that they can't take the 2 periods at Cascadia because they're gonna lose .08?
Well, and I guess that's
And
a
it's
real
a challenge.
question, because
Yeah.
I have heard, you know, just total from the anecdote sphere, that, oh, you know, the counselor didn't tell me about Running Start because it cost the district money, they don't need to do this. And again, right, but it's a rumor mill.
That's not our
I
message.
understand, but when that idea is out there, pardon,
We're North Shore Network.
whatever it is,
I don't understand.
but to make sure that when, and from the board, to the extent that we can have policy and clear guidance, if we want every student to get the educational experience that maximizes their potential to succeed in life. And if some of the programs that we have that offer cost a little bit more, cost a little bit less, hey, if it's right for you to go Running Start. Yeah, and I think the board would probably, you know, we.
Well, it's your board goal, it's a performance measure. We
Right.
say
Okay.
all kids to AP, IB, college and high school, tech prep or Running Start, so that's not
Kind of
our.
regardless of cost, right, but I just think it's, so those are the kinds of things that sometimes it's useful to reiterate that,
I think we could be unanimous in bringing up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And stopping them principals.
Okay, also programmed in is, class sizes are, the state is funding, better ratios. And keep in mind, those ratios, in K3 include specialists. So it's not necessarily the class size that you see, it's the music, the PE, the library, the 5 sections of those a week, plus the classes that are combined for this funding. So they do recognize that every teacher gets a prep period. That prep period is usually served by the students going to music, PE, or library, and those are counted as relief.
And I'm confused why this is a negative number.
Yeah, it's a negative expenditure. So it
Added
will,
into-
Increase by.
It's actually gonna increase our revenue.
we're increasing our revenues.
And this is if they fund it, or?
You know,
It's
it's
planned
already
to be funded.
programmed in the biennial budgets.
So we were already making the ratios and funding it out of
Correct.
levy,
Oh,
so now.
Yeah,
so
they're
because
catching
we
up
were
to
hiring
us.
we were basically providing a high level service that was being
Funded.
unfunded,
Underfunded.
we're now being funded for the higher quality of service that we were
We're
providing.
getting close.
Closer. Yeah.
I said higher level, I didn't say.
Yeah, we're getting
It's
close.
still not 1-to-1, but we're getting close.
Okay, okay, cool.
Take it.
Well,
Yeah,
So that's good news,
where do
to
we
have a
have
little
to get?
celebration.
Where do we have to get?
Uh,
Or we don't know yet because it hasn't been solidified.
Well, it's like, what's it go, like 22-to-1 or something, and it's got different, there's different
Yeah.
ratios at different
Depending
grade
on the
levels in K3.
Everybody's ultimate goal, 20 years from now is 17-to-1. If anybody could ever get there, I don't know, but
But that's where legislators get a little bit confused and frustrated, is because some of the high poverty schools that are already funded at an even lower rate than that, they walk around the schools and they don't see classrooms of that size, and they wonder why. Well, it's because that same pot of teachers that ratio generates is not just classroom teachers, it's all the specialists, it's any interventionists you're gonna have, anything else that's serving that grade level is coming from that same pot. And so, that's been a real challenge to get policymakers to understand.
Hasn't there been dialogue of making it one teacher per classroom? Or did that get, I don't remember what that was.
and
They go back and forth, that would be disastrous, because then that would be a gigantic unfunded.
And that's the 4
Yeah,
extra
yeah.
elementaries we need at that point
Yeah,
and all
correct.
that.
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically, now you're not funding the prep time anymore, and the teachers have the prep time and the prep time. And, so, it's one of 2 negatives in this chart. Okay. So now we are going to, except for, I think, 2 items, we're going to turn to the list that is not in the 3-year projection, okay? Because perhaps decisions haven't been made yet,
Or you haven't had a chance to see it.
you haven't had a chance to see it. Okay, perfect.
These are some of the flexible things, right, that we looked at last year.
A little more discretionary than the first bulk that I just presented.
These are ones that I would say Cabinet has processed and we would prioritize highly. However, part of the concern we heard last year was that we had perhaps gotten a little farther out on the tips of our skis before you, the board, had a chance to see these things. So we wanted to have you have the opportunity to see them. But I would just like you to know that these are things we have talked about a great deal and believe are really important for us for next year.
So can I just bring one thing up, because I don't think everyone was at our board retreat, and just from the, because it's relevant to this. The WASDA, what's her name, Tricia, put together a list that we talked about this year, and I think we talked about at the retreat before. And I just highlighted because there's just 3 things that I think this is where it gets confusing for me, and you just said staff's already made this, not made the decision, but you guys have your priorities, which are probably amazing, but what we've talked about as a board is by the time the board gets the draft budget, there's very little opportunity for input. The board starts at a different place than staff with the budget because they get it late in the process, which that's been resolved this year. This makes it hard to explore options, changes without causing friction with the staff. So I think we've had this discussion and we're recognizing this, and I don't know, and I think somewhere we're still having this parallel, and this isn't the place to resolve it, but I'm just bringing it up now. think we're still having that parallel discussion in this
So, and
place. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but I strongly believe that having this discussion in February, when we specifically asked for February, when we were having those discussions in May, having this talk now instead of June is an attempt
Yes.
to meet that request. So, and these haven't been signed off on, but these, I mean, I'm sure buildings came with many more requests than this. and these
Yeah.
are-
Yeah, so this is just for all of us. It's an open dialogue. It's not pointed or directed at anybody. It's,
So what I would say is
Where I
that
think-
where we live is by and large, these day-to-day are system needs that are coming to us as we do our administrative work. That's not the work that the board does, so you're not necessarily hearing of these needs, throughout the year as we do. So that's where our process kind of comes from, is at some point in the year, we all come together, and everybody's got their own areas of responsibility, and what are you hearing, what are you seeing, what are you feeling from the departments and the staff that you supervise that they're identifying, and it's not magic, it's kind of churning the meat, but we have that advantage because we do that work on a daily basis. The board operates at a much different level.
so I think we should rediscuss this at our board retreat, so we don't have to get caught up in it right here. Because to me, it just seems like parallel tracks. And I don't want to take time away and waste any more of everybody's
Well,
time
and we
right
can
now.
definitely talk about it, because I
But-
really think that this is an attempt at getting at that. So if it's not quite meeting the need, let's talk
Yeah, I
about it
don't
and
wanna-
see where the disconnect is.
I don't want to take up any more time.
And so the first two pages again are either state kind of mandates or processes we've started that we have to continue on. In the next two pages, there's only 2 items that are the same, that have been programmed into the 3-year, and the rest I've said are, perhaps moderately discretionary. Very strongly desired, but not yet programmed. So the first of those is additional support. We are providing additional support to schools, the junior highs and the high schools, for smarter balanced assessment, actually all schools, I'm sorry. But we had factored elementary support into the 15-16 budget. We had to factor in some support into the secondaries, and that support, people would like that support to be continued, because Smarter Balanced is taking quite a bit more time and time away from the classroom than was originally anticipated,
So
so.
we're still doing
Still
parallel.
doing
assessments.
parallel
At the
assessments.
high
Old
school, it's
system
not
and new
SBA, it's the old system and the new system all at the same time, which really taxes
Taxes.
their ability to meet
The workers.
expectation. Yeah, it does.
So we provide some relief this year. The schools would like the relief to continue. Okay, here is where I heard you many, many times, okay?
I saw that.
So this is discretionary, but I really hope we do it. We're suggesting $5 per pupil, increase to the school budgets, and then the schools would stop asking for those sorts of kind of essential classroom needs.
I'm still clapping to you.
Okay.
Is there a way, I know that this isn't finalized, but is there a way, I'm thinking the problem we ran into last year is that it comes home in the June report cards, the supply list for the fall.
We'll make sure
Oh,
that they're.
trust me,
supply
the
list.
principals, the principals are well aware
Okay.
that there won't be any requests.
And how, you're gonna charge $5 to the student?
No,
Oh.
we're giving them $5.
We're giving the schools,
Oh, I
$5
see,
more
I see.
dollars per student.
every
Okay.
school, $5 more per student, so that they
We should
can use
cover
their
their
building
costs.
budget and buy more Kleenex and hand
Now,
sanitizer.
I have a question. What if they aren't using that money to keep it stocked? I guess we cross that bridge when we.
Well, they're not gonna ask parents for it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And that's a huge change in elementary. It's gonna
Yeah.
cause quite a
Yeah.
stir with the staff because they're very accustomed to sending out those
Right.
supply
Yeah.
lists and they like a certain thing and all that, and all
Yeah.
that's going away.
So I'm gonna suggest, we haven't even got to the complicated part yet. so I'm gonna suggest-
Okay, PBIS, positive behavior intervention support. We have commitments to complete the rest of our elementaries and junior highs. That will be year 3 for cohort 3, wrapping in the rest of the elementaries and the junior highs. And we have lined up the trainer, thank you, for next year. So we are considering that to be part of our 3-year.
And we do see the PBIS as well as part of our equity and diversity plan, because it really is about creating a school environment that's safe and welcoming and supportive of all kids.
Okay. Our SAS instructors our administration is struggling a bit at second semester. They're not able to bring in as many 9th graders who are perhaps blowing out, as you guys tell me, at their junior highs because we're maxed on staff, and sometimes it's hard to get a staff person second semester as opposed to hiring earlier. Then this is the final done deal. This is part of the AAA bargaining, which is the Activities Athletics Association, was that the secondary transportation budgets were not sufficient. And that was one of the things that was agreed to, was to up the school's budgets for activities and athletic
So is
transportation.
that really discretionary then, if it's a?
No, and that is why you have 2 sheets of paper.
Oh, okay.
There is a difference in the second piece of paper. I'll keep moving along. A request to increase athletic directors to a 1.0. We believe when North Creek comes on board, we would like to have that done before North Creek comes on board.
Because it would be 9-12.
Yep, 9 through 12 instead of 10 through 12.
We moved them from 0.6 to 0.8 last year in consideration of the fact that we're moving more of the high school, the 9th grade sports incrementally to the high school every year, so adding the work a little bit.
Restore funding for ASB bookkeeper. We, years ago in the budget lean cutting years, we asked the high schools to pay for half of their bookkeeper out of their parking revenues. Well, North Creek's not gonna have 12th graders the first year. They're not gonna have parking revenues, as well as this is a sore spot, as we have recovered from all the budget cuts. It's really a sore spot for them, and we would like to bring it, we're funding 0.75, we would like to
That's
restore that.
definitely dialogue on the various pages.
These two, the next ones, these would come out of the $2.5 million transition costs. Getting an HR analyst for all the teacher moves and hires. And then also a communications specialist for about a 1-year period, so not ongoing, and I've got that marked.
So the communications person's temporary?
Yes.
1 year.
Applicable for transition purposes.
Leanne?
Oh, I believe it.
Another unfortunate outcome of the budget cutting years was we eliminated library secretaries at the high schools and junior highs.
Cigarette burns.
And yet the work remains, and they're really struggling to get that work done. And so what they do is they use their building budget to fund additional hours.
We actually have a negotiated requirement that we provide 3 hours in the library with
Okay.
NCA, and it hasn't been part of the staff allocation to buildings, so they've had to take it out of building budgets.
Unintended consequence that we would like to fix. We have a principal on special assignment that currently is a 0.6 FTE. Would like to increase to a 0.8 FTE. Jeff is probably the best at explaining all of those items, such as pro teacher maybe.
Well, there's a number of things. The principal on special assignment was hired 2 years ago to assist in the transition to the new evaluation system. There's been a number of new requirements in terms of changes in the certification rules for new teachers. And both the increase in that requirement and support of our teacher induction program, which we started 2 years ago, the supervision of those mentor teachers, and the continuation of the induction program for new teachers, which has been actually a great success but needs to continue. And just simply growth in the number of certificate staff we've had necessitates increasing that position.
And increasingly younger staff who are more access.
Yes, our accessing mentor.
Okay, so the next item we talked about, we have a placeholder for diversity and equity training, and don't know what that would necessarily look like, but we have the placeholder there. The world has changed yet again. You know, during the recession, it was much easier to hire and attract and hire, I suppose, employees. And I know our peer districts are increasingly going out of state. So it is getting harder to
How do you
recruit.
get certified out of, I mean, you have to come here and certify,
Yes.
Yeah,
which is, I've heard a harder process, isn't it? I mean, like,
Depends
that's a
on the
lot
state.
of.
depends on the state and reciprocity, it's a lot.
But not for new teachers, if you maybe think about someone who's coming from being a banker or something like into the classroom.
No,
You're talking
no,
about
from
brand new,
Oregon
brand
to
new.
Washington,
No,
to California.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
process. for
Right.
it.
Programs wanna come here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're able to teach more things than you could in another state, and sometimes
No, but I-
less. You
Just
Oh,
have to
I
get
see what you're saying.
certified.
And just
Yeah.
to give you
I
an
heard
idea,
Washington standards are really high, so people coming from a lot of different states.
I think you.
Anyway,
we hired about
Going
almost
off
200
topic.
teachers for 15-16, so that's out of 1,300 certificated staff, so, and that's going to get, that number is probably gonna stay about the same or grow in the next few years. And we have increasingly smaller applicant pools and more competition for the available teachers, so.
So essentially a small amount in our total budget to ramp up our recruitment efforts. Here's the other negative. This is where we are suggesting eliminating the 2 and 7 period shuttles, which we're estimating cost $150, and supplementing those with activity buses for not only 7th period, but any other after-school activity options that more kids could access.
Didn't we vote on that?
Yeah, that's
we did
approved.
input.
So-
So the elimination of the shuttles has been approved, but the implementing the activity buses has not been, is the recommendation,
Oh, it was part of the recommendation.
It was to study.
suggested.
Oh,
Or,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So we have a facilitator for our start time task force. We're estimating about 1/2 of the cost of this year for, you know, supplies, the facilitator costs, any incidentals with running those groups, as it will start to taper off next year. The next 3 are nurses. We created a resource nurse this year, and there is a strong need to continue that in the next year. We also have a kindergarten support nurse because of all the volume of kindergartners. We expect we need that next year, but would not need it the year after when the kindergartners hopefully.
Is that just
Go back to the-
one of the primary center?
Well, it's if you have kindergarten kids take a lot of Band-Aids, and they've got, well, they do. So if you've got 300 of them on site, it severely taxes the one nurse that's there because of the age level.
So it's basically, you know, to provide support, you know, healthcare plans, all the things that you need to do with new students.
What's the resource nurse? What do they do?
They travel, because nurses are increasingly hard to find subs for. So they do some of that work. They also fill in for those nursing assignments that we just have partial assignments, some of the smaller schools. And if we've got, for instance, a group of diabetic kids that need all-day care from a nurse, then they fill in some of those assignments.
I think we also had some kids who needed nursing services on the bus.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. There are some that have to ride the bus beginning and end because they are so fragile medically that they have a nurse.
So the last one is, again, during budget reduction years, we thought that the proximity of Sorensen and West Hill would be a better fit than perhaps it's turned out. And so there is a desire for each location.
It makes sense, there's fragile kids at most places.
Well, West Hill's substantially larger than it was back
Yes.
when we made that cut as well.
So if you look at your not complete PowerPoint, what I have done on the extra copy is The items that are italicized on the last 2 pages are desires, but not programmed into the 3-year budget. Basically awaiting, further review. The sum of all items is 1.8 million. The sum of the italicized items is 960,000. Of that 960,000, 192 is attributable to the 2.5 million startup. So basically, it would be 960 less 192 for 16, 17, and some of it going beyond.
So this isn't, I just want to clarify, this isn't the same sheet that we got last year where that we had, like, I remember, what's the word I'm looking for, achievement, opportunities, those kind of programs kind of, does it, remember we had like that, you know what I'm talking about?
It is, but I lumped them a little bit differently this year. So last year, it might have been athletics and activities were lumped together. Where they were more primary center, I lumped them. North Creek, I lumped them. But it's that exact same.
It's the exact same process of how this list has been created. Last year, we were still categorizing them based on the core mission priorities that we identified in 2009. But I think in discussion with the board since then, we've determined that those probably are stale, and we talked about perhaps doing some refresh on them next year. So we've just gotten rid of those labels, but it's the same process as to how this list has been created versus how that list was created.
So let me just ask you a question really quick. I see that we have the ESL, right? Is there any other area that I'm not seeing here that goes towards targeting the increasing funding for the achievement gap, targeting those kids, the free reduced lunch kids, the Hispanic kids, where we're still seeing these huge gaps?
Well, certainly I would think the full day kindergarten build out is a big part of that. And will continue to be a big part of that in the coming years. And then in all the categorical areas like LAP or Title I, et cetera, we fit program in with allocation. So we don't really talk about that as part of this because we get a certain dollar amount for those programs, and then we align staff and services to that dollar amount. So if those dollar amounts go up, we automatically can provide more services, but it's a money in, money out, so it doesn't, these things reflect what would be sort of net adds to the bottom line of the budget.
And when you say LAP, is that federal dollars or those
LAP are state dollars, title are federal dollars.
Okay.
Same idea.
But they're
for
dedicated.
Dedicated for remediation.
So we get it, we spend it.
Correct.
On
Yeah.
remedial
Then there's
services.
gaps from what they provide, then that has to come from the other choice.
Same thing with
So, but to Kimberly's question, if LAP or title
That's huge.
funds were reduced by the state or by the Fed, then the students that we have need, that we have a goal to attend to, there's a bigger hole there. So I guess maybe,
We have to adjust the services somehow.
right, but I guess the question is do
I
we
saw
see
the
any
ESL.
predicted loss in those revenues? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I would add probably, Kimberly, to your question too, I would add as another way as we look at the whole PBIS.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
social,
Yeah.
the social
Yeah.
learning, yeah, which.
By
we-
the way, I tell you, I'm so thankful Gianna was the first year of it. I love it. It's,
Well, we saw it in,
I do love it. But I have
Ken-
personal
Ken-
experience
Ken
with
did a
it.
big
was it
presentation.
Woodland?
With my child.
Wouldn't have it.
Yeah, Wooden is part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was so integrated
It's
into the
amazing.
language and you could, I had a couple sidebars with teachers, it was so helpful for them.
Right.
That- Yeah,
And just to add, I know we're all wanting to get out of here, but again, that's like something that the board talks about offline. Maybe we're not having the conversations with you. What I mean by offline is in a retreat. So I just want to make note of kind of these little disconnects. So when we're having our retreats and doing these things that it's not a criticism, please don't hear it that way. It's are we having the same type of discussion? Are we overlaying?
And so, and I think if you think of budget priorities as the board, we're always thinking up here anyways. My takeaway from this is these are expenses, I mean, some of them are discretionary, but North Shore Primary Center, North Creek High School, these are expenses that are getting added that staff sees coming, period, and so they're documenting that and then showing us how it works out in terms of budget.
And
Right,
those
but I'm
are
talking about like
board-
achievement, closing that.
Right,
receiving
but we have a
everything.
whole other slate of things that they want to bring to
Ah.
our
But
attention.
I would say as well, that in the primary center or the whole kindergarten enrollment mitigation plan, that was a decision of the board, and that came with $1.5 million cost to it, that once that decision was made, that becomes part of our budget planning. So